Yeah. So I'd like to say if we could say something there. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to see everybody here on the dais, and nice to see folks here in the chambers with us. So here we are for an official City Commission Committee of the Whole meeting. So I would like to call the Kalamazoo City Commission Committee of the Whole to order for Monday, April 1st, 2024. And our first order of business is a roll call. Clerk Moss.
Commissioner Cooney. Commissioner Decker.
Present.
Commissioner Hoffman. Commissioner Pradle.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hess.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. Thank you, Clerk Moss. May I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Hoffman and Commissioner Cooney?
Moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Decker,
Support.
supported by Vice Mayor. I withdraw part of that request now. So this is for Commissioner Hoffman. Okay.
On support.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? All right, thank you so much. Well, we are honored to have our COO, Lamb, here with us this evening. So next on our agenda is communications. Do we have any communications, COO Lamb?
I'll save communications for the 7 o'clock meeting. Thank you.
Okay, save them for 7. Sounds good. Now is the opportunity for public comments. Just as a reminder, at the Committee of the Whole meeting, you would have 2 minutes for public comments. There's also a public comment period available at our business meeting, which starts at 7 o'clock tonight. So now is the opportunity. If you would like to provide a comment for our Committee of the Whole meeting today, please come forward. You have 2 minutes. Please state your name and whether you live in the city. All right, seeing no one, we'll move ahead here. We have some important things on our work session this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to COO Lamb to get us started.
Yes, thank you. First up on our agenda, we're going to do a bit of a recap and overview of the February 17th City Commission retreat. You may remember as one of our action items or next steps, we said we'd come to you on April 1st to be able to explain the work that we did together, and more importantly, the work that's happened since we've gotten together and the work that will continue as we develop the 2025 budget process. So with that, I'd like to call up Assistant City Manager Rebecca Kick. She's going to lead us off, and then we've got a handful of staff that will be here presenting on the various strategies. You should also have a copy of the presentation she's going through in front of you.
Good evening.
Welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. So as you all know, each year, as soon as one budget is developed, we quickly time warp and we start to asking you questions on the next budget. So as we started to prepare, we always know February is our milestone. That's when we do the City Commission retreat. And as soon as we finished that retreat, the strategies are then workshopped by departments or department teams to include measures, staff capacity, and budget. And the next milestone is then in May when we begin to craft and create special budget requests that incorporate your priorities. Now, the way that we did that, and the way that we've done this for the last couple of years, is we have used a goals, outcomes, strategies and measures model. And so on this slide, it's called the GOSM model. So that's goals, outcomes, strategies, and measures. And we introduced that so that we could really begin to define specific outcomes. And that's where these 5 outcomes were created in 2024. And so that's what the 2024 budget was focused on, those outcomes. So we presented those to you again. And we populated those goals and outcomes in a matrix that then you began to use as a survey tool. And you prioritized your top 5 outcomes and provided staff with some specific strategies that you've also heard from the community that you would like to have staff consider. We then met together in February, where we workshopped these, and the retreat resulted in 4 outcome priorities that you have before you, and staff began to identify the potential strategies to achieve those priority outcomes. So as you saw, 5 became 4, and we ranked these in terms of impact and difficulty. And so what you're going to hear from the departments in the next few slides are those specific strategies that are directly related to these outcomes. Okay? So I will have Laura introduce the next department.
Sure. First up, we've got Kevin Ford, our Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo Coordinator. He's going to go over the next 2 slides.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Welcome.
Thank you for having me and my colleagues here. So I'll get us started. So this RX Kids Kalamazoo model was identified as a priority strategy at the retreat. Just want to give you an update of where we are. It hasn't been that long, but we are steady pushing to move this forward and make it a reality. So the city remains in conversations with local partners. There are folks from the foundation and other community stakeholders that we're involved in terms of making this happen. What I've done as staff to push this forward on the city side is make a request for 2025, a special request that will cover a matching portion of the program. The entire program, to my understanding right now, stands at around $9 million to get up and running. So the money I've requested is just a small portion of that to catalyze movement in the community and from other stakeholders to get it up and going. The second piece was home-based child care supports. I made a mistake and didn't get my edits in time to the team. There's some clarification on this particular slide that I want to highlight. And so it's not so much increasing access to child care, but increasing business supports to home-based child care businesses. So that's where we're at with that. Again, I made another request for 2025 via our internal city process. Luckily, both of these requests have moved on to phase 2, and they'll be getting reviewed from city staff, and we'll have some update of where it goes after that in terms of funding for 2025. Are we answering questions, or we just moving?
We'll run through it, and then we'll open up for questions for anybody.
Okay.
If that works for you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Next up, we're going to have
Thank you,
Assistant
Mr.
Chief
Ford.
Jude and Patrick McVeary, our Parks and Rec Director, and they're going to speak a little bit about the strategy to increase youth participation in city programs.
All right.
Welcome,
Good.
gentlemen. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. So one of the priorities that was identified is increased youth participation in city programming. And one of the strategies that we came up with is, one, identifying who those at-risk youth are. And if you remember last year, right around this time, I reported out that we were able to we were able to build a program to capture police juvenile contacts. And now that we're into our full year of capturing that data, we can really identify who some of our most at-risk youth are, and then look at getting them into additional city programming if that's available for them. Last year, and about the halfway mark throughout the year, we were intentional about visiting some of those youth who were constantly on that report. And we went and visited their parents and the young persons, and we took members from our POPs program and NAACP to visit these homes, and we gave them literature and information about the Police Athletic League and free city programming throughout the summer. What we didn't capture, and this is what we hope to do this year, is actually capture the data on how many of those youth actually participated in city programming. And so we have a way that we're looking at right now to partner with Parks and Rec to, one, go out and recruit some of the kids to participate in those programmings and be intentional about it. We have their names, we know who they are, so we'll use that list and build off of that to get some of the kids involved. And then we'll have a matrix on the back end to be able to capture the kids that actually participated. And then we can figure out what we need to do different, right? If we're not seeing the numbers of kids that are participating, then we have to change our recruiting efforts, or we got to change the way that we're notifying the kids, and we'll be able to have some type of matrix for that.
Yeah, just wanted to echo what Assistant Chief Duday said. Basically, we had this kind of in place last year as, you know, the first steps, being able to track the youth participants and the contacts that we have with the family, not only from public safety, but also our department side of things. We'll be able to show which programs the youth signed up for, which ones that they took part in, how many they took part in, and then through a collaborative effort, we'll be able to hopefully identify any barriers that they might not be able to overcome in participating, be it transportation, you know, timing, things like that. One thing I wanted to highlight kind of from what this work did last year was the visits that they made. Johnny Berry, our youth program advocate and overseer of PAL, actually spoke to a young girl that was on the list, and her first question was, well, what if I don't want to participate in athletics? And they kind of struck up a conversation, and the sewing program that actually started last year was a direct result of that conversation that they had with that young girl that didn't want to participate in athletics but still wanted to find something to do in her spare time. That program was a huge success last year. All of the sessions that we initially offered were full, offered a second set of sessions. Those are full, and there's a lot of movement towards people looking forward to that again this year. So that was part of a success that we had with this program from last year.
And the last thing to note is looking at the year-end data for police juvenile contacts, specifically with police contacts with offenders. 22 compared to 23 stats. In 2023, just capturing that data and being able to be intentional about contacting those juveniles, we were able to reduce that number by 12%. Overall contacts with juveniles was reduced by 5% compared to 2022. So the matrix that we're currently using are working. We just need to follow up on the outcomes on the back end with kids being involved with city programming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to call up Sherilyn Parsons, Housing Development Supervisor. She's going to go over the next two programs.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Overcoming a little bit of a respiratory virus thing, so hang with me. Not going to be quite as lively as I sometimes am, but I'm still very passionate about this, as you know. So I'm here to talk about affordable housing opportunities. And so in 2025, one of the continued asks when we had the retreat, we talked about high impact and something that we could push forward relatively easy, and that really is our gap financing and funding. This is a program that we have worked the last few years to really implement within the city. So to assign jobs and duties accordingly, and also to put the process and procedure in place. So this continued funding really helps to allow development to happen in markets where the cost to build is greater than the cost that the real estate market itself is appreciating, or the value of the real estate market. So in some of our center core areas, the cost to construct single family is more than what the house will sell for at the end of construction. That's a direct result of the real estate market that it's being built in. In some markets where they're really hot markets, you can construct new construction and then sell it for more than you built it for. That's an appreciating or a thriving market. Some of our real estate markets are not appreciating to the level that we want to see them. So part of this gap financing, I don't know if it's me or the microphone, why I'm going in and out. Am I going in and out to you guys?
No.
It's just my ears, sorry. Part of this gap financing, actually, I lost my train of thought here. The markets, sorry.
Yes.
With the new construction of the single family, what we've seen in the single family new construction is, one, the markets are not appreciating as fast as the construction costs are. Two, the cost to borrow money has reduced buyers' potential. When interest rates go up, the amount of home you can buy goes down. And three, with our markets and new construction, we have found that the need for the gap financing has increased, both for the subsidy and for the home buyer. So what we're proposing in 2025 is, with the pre-approved plans that we've been working on, there's a smaller footprint. There's a few smaller footprints, which would allow us to construct homes for less money. And there's also attached units. And so what we're really hoping in the market is to look at different size footprints as well as attached home ownership opportunities. And this will work to both build our markets and preserve equity and wealth for those who are within the markets. So that's one part of the strategy of the gap financing. The other part is to continue to fund multi-unit developments. This is to assist in getting affordable units in developments where traditionally affordable units wouldn't pencil out. So it's to continue to support those multi-unit developments. And so we would continue to track the way that we've been tracking our success, which is to show you the amount of units, the amount of subsidy, the amount of market rate, and deeply affordable units, the whole spectrum. So we would continue to work our goals on that same strategy. The next strategy is one that was lifted up from the community and from you, and it's the home share model. So what we've been, the conversations that we've been having, we've had conversations with Toby Hannah Davies and Michelle Huckabee from Milestone Senior Services. So we had a community member in the name of Toby, reach out to a community partner. So this is a program that currently isn't existing in Kalamazoo, but there was a desire to see it come to pass. And so we had conversations with Toby and Michelle and decided that this funding opportunity would support the necessary market and feasibility studies for the model itself. So in the conversations, it was really determined that to initiate this program, we're going to lean into a model where it's not about really rental income, or it's not about the exchange of money, but it's rather partnering the need with the need. The reason we're leaning into that home share model is because, one, with rentals, there can be tax implications. There could be guardianship or heir concerns when you get into rentals. And then we really don't want to run into a barrier with rental registrations or potential PRE reduction. So in current zoning, we didn't see any initial barriers to have a program like this run. So Although we know that the home share would need inspections, it would be done through the program and the partner rather than through our rental staff. And so this funding would help to support what the program looks like, the agency or agencies that have the capacity or what capacity is needed to launch it. And then they will be researching what other models are out there and, once again, assessing the feasibility and determining how the home share could actually be connected in our community and launched. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Parsons.
So just in wrap up, those specific strategies came directly from your commission priorities. But of course, we know the budget has a life of its own, right? So right now, again, I had mentioned that the next step of this process will be our special requests. It will include the strategies that we've just presented to you that are related to your specific outcomes, but there will also be the alignment with Imagine Kalamazoo, neighborhood plans, our asset management plans and the like. We'll go through our capital improvement plans process. So as we get into September, our operating budgets and our budget review, I'm sure we will be returning to you many times and updating you about the budget along the way. So that concludes our presentation. So if you have any questions, we're here for you.
Commissioners, questions? Yes, Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to ask Kevin, I think it's great that that we're talking about a contribution to the RX Kalamazoo. I just want to say I hope it's a substantial contribution because $9 million a year, and it's going to be like a 3-year, I guess we would start off with. So I think it would be important that we make a significant contribution to that. I'm not asking you to give me how much right now, unless you want to.
It's based on, part of this is based on if the state budget is approved.
Yeah.
So we're working through the ramifications of if it is or if it isn't. My request is for 1.5 million to match the TANF dollars that will come from the state for the program.
Good, good. Thank you. Now, the second question I had with the child care, are there any state funds available for that? Are we pursuing any of those?
We're working closely with Pulse at Upjohn, who's working on a regional child care plan, and there's some state activity happening at the current time. We don't know how much is going to be available for implementation of the regional child care plans, but we're staying in close conversation and partnership with Pulse to kind of move alongside each other with this.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just had one more question. You guys don't have to get up, but with regard to reducing crime, like John was so successful with the sewing, have we asked these young guys what would they like to see happen? What are some of the things that they would like to see? Because we hadn't had sewing on our agenda, but that was something they liked.
Yeah, that's a good question, Commissioner Cooney. One of the things that we're actually launching in about another 2.5, 3 weeks is a new baseball program that PAL is going to be overseeing, that we work a little bit with Vice Mayor Hess on. So there hasn't been a recreational baseball league program within the city at Versluis in many, many years. And that's one that came out of kind of the conversations that Johnny had last summer. And it's taken off really well. I was talking to him this morning about the possibility of adding some more kids that have already signed up. So he's actually reopening some of the registration that he had for the program to increase that. So there are talks. Yeah, we definitely take input from both the kids that participate in the programs and the families as well. So if there's any type of new program that comes about, he's always willing to look into that and research and try and figure out how we can incorporate that.
Great. So the other thing I was going to ask you was, I know John had the Lions in here last year, and it was oversold, and then he was trying to get them back again this year. Is that going to happen?
It's going to happen. I don't have the dates offhand, but we actually, so what we've done this year is it went from a one-day camp last year to a two-day camp this year. It's actually going to be at Mayor's Riverfront at the SRC football field. I think the registration already opened. I'm not really positive, but I know we increased it to a two-day camp because the Lions felt it was such a success. And depending on this year, there might be an opportunity to offer a four-day camp next year. So those are actually, they're increasing based off the participation that we've had in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Cooney. Commissioner Decker?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys for bringing this information to us. And Commissioner Cooney, you kind of already asked a few of the questions that I had already. I did want to say something to Mr. Ford. Is Commissioner Cooney was asking about other funding that we could possibly be finding. Definitely take a look into the Early Childhood Investment Corporation. That could definitely be a way where we can get some extra fundings for the at-home child care. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Commissioner Cooney pretty much summed up all my questions for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Vice Mayor Hess?
Yeah, so he took one of them, but transportation was an issue. Is transportation an issue here, and did our funding go through to get you the van? Patrick?
We're talking about that later this evening, during this meeting.
Never mind.
Yeah, okay.
Just a minute. So we have all these programs. Who are the coaches? Who are the leaders? Who are the teachers? How do we recruit them? Do you need help recruiting them? Is there outreach for that? And how can the community be involved in these?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the coaches are residents in the community that have kind of had that contact in those types of sports or programs that we've utilized. The one drawback that we have not been able to locate yet is a Rocket football coach for kind of the Edison South Side neighborhood. We thought we had one. Johnny thought he had one, and then something fell through with that person. I'm not sure if it was work or whatnot, but that's the only area that we're kind of looking for Rocket football. The baseball program, I believe, is full with coaches. That's doing great. And I think midnight basketball, we have enough coaches from the past 2 years. So.
Other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Bradle?
Hey, good to see you, Kevin. So just had a couple questions, actually perfect with areas that you were presenting on. One of them was about the grants to home-based daycares. And just curious in terms of like what you're envisioning, or as you're developing that, are you envisioning just a target number that we invest in 2025 and future years? Is there are you hoping for like a target number per neighborhood? Was just curious how you're looking at that, or if it's not quite fleshed out yet.
Right now, it's a specific number, around 10 to 20, with the majority representing our core neighborhoods.
Okay.
And it's primarily based on information we received, again, in connection with posts at the Upjohn Institute and their regional data collection of home-based childcare businesses seeking assistance on the business end. So things like marketing, HR support, all the back-end things. So it frees them up to continue to provide high-quality childcare.
I think that's great. I think that's pretty tantamount, something I hear a lot from individuals that I get an opportunity to serve in my daytime job, is just the proximity of daycare, especially our core neighborhoods really is what it comes down to. I think, I have one individual that works with us, he has to drive all the way to Comstock from the north side to take his kid to, daycare every single morning. And when there's transportation issues, that can really pose an issue. And so I think trying to prioritize in the core neighborhoods would be great if possible. The other thing I was going to ask you as well is, are you looking to market more towards like startups? So people who've been kind of thinking about doing this for a while, or maybe they're doing it, but they're not being compensated. You know, they're just helping out family or helping out neighbors or something, but want to move into a business model. Or are you looking more to invest in people who are already existing but want to grow or enhance the work that they're already doing, or could it be both?
Right now it's both.
Okay.
As we learn more, we'll get clarity around how we can be most impactful in our supports. Any startup is going to be rough, and in the childcare space in particular, is multiple challenges with that startup phase, because it's not a product like a widget or anything that they're involved in, and they often don't charge the true cost of what it takes to care for children. So right now we're looking at both, but again, as we learn more and as we get deeper in this space, then we'll be able to parse out how the city can be most effective in supporting.
Very cool. Then a question for the ARCS Kids model. Are you envisioning more of a lottery system to start off, or as kind of a pilot model, would there be just a cap in terms of just trying to pilot with a certain number of families to first see, hey, can we prove that this is actually working for households and for parents?
Right now, that's to be determined. So from the city side, I'm just requesting potentially match funds. Again, there's other folks and stakeholders that the city has been in those spaces. Alyssa Stewart from the Community Foundation has been kind of convening folks and has been more closely associated with talking to the people in Flint who architected their program. And so we're literally both here in Kalamazoo and Flint learning in real time the most effective ways to go about it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you, appreciate it. Mm-hmm. I did have a question about youth as well, and I know one thing that Superintendent Slade has really emphasized is the need to go out and knock on doors and try to find kids who haven't been showing up to school in some cases for years, especially since the pandemic, and I applaud him for those efforts. I wonder if there's any tie-in that's existing with those efforts right now in terms of the outreach of prioritizing young people in greatest need situations.
Yeah, that's a good question and good point. Last year when we did the door-to-doors, we involved Kalamazoo Public Schools with that. We actually cross-referenced our list where the most active or at-risk youth compared to the KPS list. And what we found was there's less than 10 kids actually registered to go to school at KPS with that list of 50 kids. So it's a good point. That's certainly going to be a partner moving forward, that we need to make sure that that list is also tied in with KPS's list. And so we're, meeting those or finding those barriers and hurdles and finding a solution to overcome those.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, thank you. And then I just had one question about home share. Sorry, Sherilyn. Was just curious. I can ask a question while you're walking up here, and I apologize. I know you're struggling with your voice. For the home share program, has there been much thought? I know it's very early on phase, but in terms of conversations with Toby and with Martha, and have there been conversations about like what a target number of houses would be to maybe in the first year or the first 5 years to grow into to home share, to kind of have a dream target? I feel like that could kind of help guide how much staffing there needs to be housed to help administer and inspect homes and those sort of things.
So far the conversations around that really have been, we need to see what comes out of that market and feasibility study. So it's a concept, it runs in other communities. We don't exactly know what the need is yet here. And so we're not exactly sure what capacity needs to be met. So that's part of what this funding would help to support, is to really see what the market shows and what the feasibility study produces.
Cool. The other thing I was going to ask you as well is for home share, I know that you've looked to get away from the model of call it renting, if you will, or that like compensation model. But I know, and I applaud you for that, because I think rather than just say, okay, well, we've hit a brick wall, it's too hard to figure out, now we're just going to stop. Instead, you've said, hey, we know there's plenty of people who would just be willing to kind of do a trade, if you will, for housing. And so let's at least start there. But I know one thing that makes it a really effective tool is it creates that I guess, the income stream for people who are struggling. And, even again, going back to my day job, if you look at the average number of people we serve who are of all age brackets, it's $31,000 per year. If you look at seniors predominantly, it goes to like the mid to lower 20s. So there's definitely evidence that shows, especially the people who would predominantly use this through senior services, are people who are extremely economically distressed in some cases. And, maybe even like $300 a month make a world of difference. So I guess my question is would it be on the table potentially to eventually add that as a model to allow people to provide, income to people for renting a room or staying with them?
Yeah, great question. So in the initial conversations, we thought we were going to just lean in to the no compensation. That doesn't mean that anything's off the table.
Okay.
So really in 2025, what we're really thinking about is the market study, the feasibility, what should it look like, what model works here, what's the need, and then yes, address it accordingly. So if we find that the need really is that income, then that creates a different thought about what the model should look like. Yeah. So this is just the initial conversations of what we could identify with the exchange of money, we could identify some things that would have to be addressed right away. Mm. And so we were thinking, all right, what model wouldn't have to address things right away? But
I met with Toby and Martha Huckabee a couple weeks ago, and we were just talking this over and whatnot. And one of the things I definitely encourage them is to dream big with this. Not saying that we need, 20 employees or something, but, if instead of just saying, well, we just want one person, make sure we have adequate, maybe two people, even if you're thinking that way, because I really want to make sure that we succeed at this. And, if it's just one person and then they leave, then all of a sudden you're kind of starting from scratch. And so one of the things we talked about is just that there are a number of opportunities that we could potentially partner or lean on together, whether it be the Housing for All millage or, we have the senior millage up for renewal again in August. AAA that we could work with as well. And so was there any thought or given to that about trying to work with other partners that might be natural fits to help fund this on a sustainable path? So the other thing that we talked about as well is just the need not to fund it for just 1 year and then figure it out each year, but maybe give them 3 or 5 years worth of funding to succeed and go about.
yeah, so the conversation for 2025 was really to get our foundation under us. So if the lead agency says, yes, we're all in, which so far they've indicated that they are in. And so for 2025, it really is to get that market study, that feasibility, and figure out what model is needed here and what would work. And then the launch, that would be to gear up for the launch, which would be post 2025. So yeah, we're just in the preliminary conversations. Nothing's off the table yet, but we're going to see what is produced from those studies.
And this is just more of a list of a comment that I was going to share and then I'm done. But one of the things I really wanted to emphasize is there's been a lot of talk in recent weeks and the recent months about transitional housing, right? We've had that come up a lot. This is transitional housing, right? This is exactly what we've been talking about. And it's hands down the most cost-effective way to do that. And so I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think this is exciting that the timing is coming when we've heard a lot from the community. We want to see more transitional housing, like short-term, middle ground housing while people are trying to get on their feet or find more permanent housing opportunities. So thanks for your work with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Pradel. Other questions, staff, at this time? No? Okay, thank you so much. Hey, I had just one question. I think Assistant Chief Jude, maybe it's for you. I really appreciate the idea of, engaging and trying to help encourage young people to participate in the programs. Do you feel like you have the resources so if there's other needs, beyond, hey, would you like to participate in the PALS program, that you have a way to connect families and young people with those needs also, which could be, a whole variety of, needs across the board, whether it's, food assistance or mental health services or that sort of thing.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to walk into when you knock on somebody's door, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel like a resource navigator
Yes.
when you're talking to individuals. One thing that is very beneficial to us at Public Safety is we have Kelsey Harness who's a social services coordinator, and able to provide some names and contact numbers for different resources. So when we do run into those hurdles and I don't have the answer when we're out there on the street, it's just a quick call to her to find out an answer. But if there's additional resources out there, like a catalog or something that I don't know about that has additional resources in it, really targeting the city of Kalamazoo, and that's something that we could take along with us as well. So
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Well, thanks for bringing this back, just reminding us, that things we talked about in our retreat are beginning to be further worked on, and planning around how that's going to incorporate ultimately in our 25 budget. And I do appreciate this last little sheet, the next steps in the process, and looking ahead to May, when those special requests will come in and start to enter that whole grinder, which is our internal budgeting process. So thank you so much, COO Lamb. And what's next for us?
So next, we're going to jump into the City Commission Initiative Fund. We'll start off with City Attorney Liao, who will bring us through a presentation, and we'll get to questions and discussion.
Welcome, Attorney Liao, to the other side of the dais here.
Hello, everyone. All of you should have received in front of your, at your individual seats, a copy of an Excel spreadsheet that has a listing of all the ideas for funding that the commissioners had to be funded by the City Commission Initiatives Funding, or fund, I'm sorry. That fund is funded by general fund dollars. Before I get into that, what I was tasked to do was to go through each of these ideas and determine whether or not they would be permissible expenditures using general funds under state law. So before I go there, I think it'd be important to kind of understand what determines what is a permissible and impermissible expenditure of general fund dollars. Every single day, Michigan municipalities are engaging in transactions, buying and selling goods and services. It could be hundreds, thousands over a year. There's many, a few 100,000 that are engaged. These transactions, the overwhelming majority of the transactions are related to the city's ongoing business operations. So with so much money being spent by Michigan cities, what authority is out there that ensures that public funds are being spent properly? The answer is the Michigan Constitution. Article 7, Section 26 of the 1963 Constitution provides as follows. Except as otherwise provided in the Constitution, no city or village shall have the power to loan its credit for any private purpose or except as provided by law for any public purpose. This applies to cities and villages. I am aware that counties and townships have separate authority that may be a little bit more permissive when it comes to permissible expenditures. What makes us different is that clause on the third line, except as provided by law. And I'll get into what that means shortly. To loan its credit, I've underlined that, and that has significance under the law as interpreted by the Michigan Supreme Court in 1876. To loan its credit focuses on how a city spends or lends its funds. So from that example, what we learned are two different things, is that one, for an expenditure to be proper, it has to be authorized by law and be for a public purpose. And the other primary lesson that we've learned from that constitutional provision is we cannot spend money for private purposes. No matter how worthy the causes might be, we're not allowed to spend it for private purposes. So what does authorized by law mean? It simply means, is there a statute or judicial authority to make expenditures? And what is the perfect purpose? This is the challenge for our expenditures. For the most part, for the bulk of the transactions that I discussed earlier, the public purposes are going to be easier to determine. But when you start getting into new areas of expenditures that cities haven't commonly engaged in, that analysis is very difficult. The courts themselves, the Michigan Supreme Court and Courts of Appeals, cannot provide us a precise definition. As I mentioned earlier, the thousands and thousands of transactions that cities engage in, They're varied, they have different sets of facts. It is very difficult to give cities and villages a precise definition of what that means. So what does that mean? Each of the private expenditures, or I'm sorry, each expenditure that we engaged in must be determined in each case based on its facts. That's not to mean that there hasn't been any helpful guidance from the Michigan Supreme Court. And one thing I found during this exercise is the number of cases that City of Kalamazoo has been involved in with municipal expenditures. And this is one from 1947, and I will discuss that a little bit later, but it involved the dues that we pay to MML. So back in 1947, the Supreme Court provided this. This is basically a helpful analysis. I can go through and read it, but it might take me a while to get there. But what I do want to get focus in is the very last sentence that I've emphasized. The right of the public to receive and enjoy the benefit of the use determines whether the use is public or private. This has been further refined by Michigan Supreme Court and the courts of appeal to basically mean whether the public benefit outweighs the benefit to the private party, even if the private party profits. Again, most expenditures the city makes are in support of its day-to-day operations, and some of the common examples are purchasing vehicles for its police force, mowing the public park fields, repairing streets and utility lines, purchasing office materials for the city's departments, and paying salaries. So what statutory authority gives cities the right to do these things? MCL 117.4J, subparagraph 3. It gives cities the ability to exercise all municipal powers in the management and control of municipal property and in the administration of municipal government, whether such powers be expressly enumerated or not. That is a very broad grant of authority that allows us on how to give us the ability to spend municipal general fund dollars related to that. The public purpose, it helps the city provide the core municipal services to its citizens. So now let's talk about private requests for city funds. We are not alone. Every city in the country receives requests from private groups to donate money or resources. And some of them are very worthy, very honorable, but in many cases, we won't be able to provide them money legally under the Constitution. As I mentioned earlier before, Article 7, Section 26 prohibits expenditures for private purposes. Does that mean that all requests for city funds, all private requests for city funds are impermissible? No. And what do I mean by that? Most private expenditures will fall under the two-part test that I described earlier, but some will be able to meet the test. The majority of those that are permissible private expenditures typically fall in one of three categories. The first one, a statute or judicial authority that authorizes the expenditure. And with that, there's the example that I mentioned earlier about the City of Kalamazoo 1947 case, that we had a challenge from a citizen to the annual dues that we were paying for membership into the Michigan Municipal League. The public purpose that the city argued on that case was that MML advises, informs, and educates our public officials, our employees, and our citizens with what's going on in the legislature in Lansing. That predates the 1963 Constitution and that authorized by law. So the Supreme Court said that is a public purpose. And so even though that has that case law and what it stands for has not been publicized in the form of a statute, it still serves as the authorization by law to continue paying the dues. The next one is the most common one of private expenditures that a city makes. It's a private party who performs an activity the city is authorized to do by law. So a common example, sometimes, and I've seen this in your budget, that we don't mow all our park fields. We hire a private company. But because we have statutory authority to not only purchase and maintain park facilities, we also have statutory authority to create parks and recs programs. So we can actually delegate this used by a contract to a private party to mow those on our behalf because we have the authority to do it. So that's a permissible expenditure, even though the private party is profiting from that. And the last example federal, state funds that authorize the city to make private expenditures. This would include ARPA funds, CDBG, home funds, temporary assistance for needy families funds. All of that expressly allows expenditures to be made for certain private purposes, some of which will show up on your on the chart. So when the private expenditure does meet this two-part test, I do highly recommend that you execute a contract to ensure funds are used consistent with the permissible purpose. The contract should include findings to support the expenditure, limit the use of funds solely to the permissible purpose, and require the private party to submit proof that the money was used in accordance with the permissible purpose. We do this with most of the contracts that we enter into, so this is just basically continuing that process. Now, the following are just a list of impermissible expenditures that the Michigan courts and the Attorney General have deemed to be impermissible. And these are the most common ones: contributions to churches, veterans, and nonprofit organizations, payment of funeral expenses for a person injured on governmental property, donations to a private ambulance or EMS service not under contract with the city, donations to community organizations, expenses for private road construction and maintenance, flowers to the sick or departed, contributing funds to a local public or private school to support a program or activity, sponsoring a table at a banquet to support a private organization's mission, goals, or activities, paying legal expenses for citizens in their private legal disputes. And with that, before I delve into the chart, are there any questions over the PowerPoint presentation?
Thank you, very helpful. I appreciate that, Attorney Leal. Are there questions for Attorney Leal? I saw you had a question, Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mayor. So let's take RX Kalamazoo, like the RX Flint thing. Are you saying that we couldn't contribute to that except with ARPA funds?
We can, when it comes to general fund dollars,
Yeah.
there isn't any statutory authority that authorizes the city to spend the money for prescription kids. There's nothing out there that says, cities, you are authorized to spend money for a program that helps provide prescriptions to at-risk children or to prevent health issues. That's for cities. There is ARPA, there is state and federal TANF funds that are available, and charitable organizations, but it is not, but we're talking general funds. And so I don't want to kind of say that we can never do that, because there are funding avenues that allow us to do that.
Yeah, it would just seem to me that if one of our jobs is to take care of our citizens, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
if we see that our citizens are hurting or in poverty, we should be able legally to find a way to give money to help them. Maybe we give it to an agency or something that does that, or some way.
That is the difficult exercise to try to find that funding, because the two-part test is the statutory authority that most of these requests are going to fail. The majority of the ones in your spreadsheet are permissible. There are actually some statutes out there that provide funding for something that would be arguably private, but have become public because there is a private expenditure. There is a statute that actually says we can, like support of older persons. There's a statute that specifically says it allows cities to make appropriations for services for older persons. They include social, legal, health, housing, educational, emotional, nutritional, recreational, or mobility status. If that wasn't there, some of these programs or allowances probably would not be permissible. And so that is the difficult dilemma that we find ourselves in as Michigan cities and villages, that our counterpart county governments and townships may not find themselves because they don't have to look for a statute to authorize it.
So there's no similar statute for children? There's one for older adults, but there's nothing like that for children?
There may be some, but it involve other types of services for children, but not for the prescription program. The way the Flint is structured, and I printed their information, it is to provide two types of cash grants, one during pregnancy for prescriptions for the mother and the child, and then $500 a month for 12 months after the child has been born. And so, but that is limited to prescriptions and those types of medications.
Oh.
And so there is, but that is the way that program has. Is there, they have gone to fund this program. They're using TANF dollars to fund that program.
Partially, but they're also using city funds from Flint.
And that is the, I will tell you that without really saying anything, the municipal expenditures and the law isn't well understood throughout the state.
Okay.
You have to understand that there are smaller cities in the state that don't have, the resources, to get this information. Are expenditures being made for impermissible purposes? Yes, there are. Not, in the state. And that's simply because this isn't well known. I mean, a lot of smaller communities don't have the benefit of having the resources to be able to find out this information. And so, but that is how, because when printing off with Flint, I have gotten how they're funding this, and TANF is their funding source. If they're going to go into general funds, then that is Flint's issue to deal with.
Okay, I just think that somehow we have to find something that says that we can take care of kids when they need help. And I don't know exactly, I mean, I don't know, but somehow we got to find that out. Because how do we get money for recreation for kids?
Because there's a specific state statute that allows cities to develop and fund recreation programs. And that's the companion to the constitutional provision that we can create our own park facilities and buildings. And so our recreational programs is where we have all these programs, youth football, baseball, all of that, because we're specifically authorized. And I know in some cases it'll make sense and in others don't. But again, it all is because statutes providing our authority, while they're being passed more and more and giving us more authority to venture in these areas, the law usually doesn't catch up with where we're already at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Commissioner Decker, do you have a question? All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Attorney Leal, this halfway point on his presentation? All right. Thank you, sir. Please continue.
The spreadsheet that you have what's there highlighted in, you'll see three different colors. Well, let me back up. There are 18 requests that were made. Each request has the idea, the budget, some budget info if it was available, the description, and then the two-part test, the source of authority.
Just a quick, I'm sorry, just an interruption here. So these, just to remind us here where these 18 requests came from. So that came from a conversation that we had here on the dais, correct?
Yes,
right.
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then at the very end are the two categories for the two-part test: the statutory authority and the public purpose. Those highlighted in green have met both requirements. Those that are, and with the exception of number 9, there were 3 different entities for incubator support. 2 of the 3 would qualify under specific statute. The third one, the KNAC, they're not there yet. They will be there. They have publicized on their website that after completing the building renovations, they plan on becoming a similar type of incubator as these other 2, providing the programs, resources, and physical space. So when they're done with that and they move into the next phase of their operation of providing the incubator support, they will also be an entity, a private nonprofit entity that provides resources to develop the local economic growth of the community to receive general fund dollars should this commission wish to provide that. Then those that are highlighted in yellow are the requests could be done provided that they are structured in the way that is described under the statutory authority. And then those highlighted in red, those for a lack of specific statutory authority for those types of programs, there's nothing that came close to authorizing that. And then number 12, which is the assist with covering costs to store pods. Well, the Emergency Housing Project from the Housing Resource, Inc. is a program that we have provided ARPA funding federal funding to help with that program. We have to look at the request itself. The request is for storage purposes. And so that is not for public purposes. It's hard to argue that is directly related to the provision of assistance to the homeless, such as blankets, toiletry kits, food, etc. It seems that it's more of a private benefit to the organization for storage, unrelated to the actual direct provision of the services that we've already provided for. And so in that case, weighing the public and the private benefit, it seems that the private benefit is more than the public benefit. I could go through each of the red ones if you wish. I'm just looking in interest of time if you want me to delve into that or if you just have questions.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Leal. Well, I know that one of the things that we're going to try to do this evening is get back to this conversation that was initiated, a couple months ago or a little longer than that maybe, related to approximately $190,000 of last year's unspent and then this year's budgeted, specific for the commission to allocate dollars. And what I'm hoping actually this evening is that we can maybe work that down together and do some prioritizing around that. I mean, we can certainly keep talking about it, have another meeting about it, but maybe we can do something together that begins to target this. And I know that it wasn't, and maybe something else has come to mind for folks, since we originally had this discussion. But I think one thing Attorney Leal has done is just try to help us see that, if nothing else, for some of the ideas on this list of 18, there could be a bigger challenge, than just deciding we want to prioritize it in terms of how would we go about doing that. So I think that's an attempt for just to add some additional information for our conversation related to our ranking. Does anybody want to ask particularly, or okay, Commissioner Wilson, yes.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Attorney Leal. I had a question on one of the, my only submission here for the Douglas Community Association.
Okay.
Which number is that?
Sorry, number 13.
Okay.
I know that for repurposing for the for a STEM center or something along those lines would be outlawed due to its relation to public educational uses. I was just wondering if that item was rephrased to grant or funds to supplement construction, to make the public library, still exist and accessible, that works for both the Douglas and the library. Would that still fall under the same statute, I guess? Not be allowed?
And you raise a really good point, is that the analysis is fact-driven. Slight tweaking in facts could result in a different answer. And that's a very important point that you raised, Commissioner Wilson. Public libraries, even though there is a separate entity that's created that actually serves the Kalamazoo Public Library, the cities are authorized to also have libraries. We just don't do it because it's already there, but we could. As a result, that we could actually donate funds to providing services, changing the facts. Can they provide a library service to the citizens apart from what they do? Yes, we can actually give funds under those because we are authorized. That's the second private purpose expenditure that's permissible. We could create our own library and offer that for the citizens. We could also give money to an established library to do the same thing.
Thank you.
Other questions for Attorney Leal before we kind of move to further our discussion here? Yes,
yeah.
Vice Mayor Hess.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that presentation, Attorney Leal. I don't see the transportation issue on our list of requests.
We can buy vans.
We can buy vans.
Yeah, but I think that had already been in, so I don't know how that didn't end up on this list, COO Lamb. But
When we discussed this back in January, we acknowledged that there was both Shop with the Senior, which was a program that had been done, there might be interest in continuing, and then we also indicated that the $30,000 that had been allocated for a youth van wasn't going to be sufficient for us to be able to purchase a van that would have a good long life. So wanting to acknowledge these were the ideas that came from the commission. Certainly for tonight's conversation, you could also grapple with the Shop with the Senior program continuing, as whether also if there is additional support for funding to allow for a full van to be purchased.
Good question.
Wasn't that already on there? Didn't Commissioner Decker already put that on there? Commissioner Decker?
You know, I'm not sure about that. I do know that we had requested funds for the 30,000 before, but these were new ideas that we had, and I don't think at that time we really knew how much a van was going to cost. But I am more for putting that on here and making sure that we uplift that and get that going, because I think that's also going to work within the youth participation that we have that's going to start this summer.
The $30,000 was approved for use in the 23 budget. So that part was approved. It was whether or not there's support for additional dollars to complete the purchase. So this matrix was intended to be those ideas that needed to be vetted. We do know that the van is an eligible expenditure, as is Shop with the Senior. So certainly you could add those to the list for consideration for this evening.
Help me. If we approved $30,000 for the van, does that mean that we would only have $160,000 to allocate?
Correct. So the $30,000 that you've already approved is not part of the total that you're working with. That's already been set aside. Should you want to put an additional $35,000 to allow for that van to be fully purchased, that $35,000 would come out of the $190,000 that you're working with.
Thank you.
Good questions. Commissioner Pradel.
City Attorney Leo, just had a couple questions for you. So one of them was about the down payment assistance for homeownership. I'm assuming that's because kind of the way you explained it, that the existing down payment assistance that we're providing is through like CDBG and homes type funding.
Yes, and that one, I think there was a different type of funding source. Number 10, I'll tell you. The Michigan Home Loan, the MSHDA, is the part of the program, and then they also listed for the different types of funders, private nonprofits that contribute money to help assist with that.
So it's that example of state, federal, and then.
And so there is funding for that, and that is the way to fund the program.
Gotcha. For the example about the assisting covering the cost to store pods, I guess like maybe you can help me understand. I can see how it would be perceived as helping a private entity, but you know when you were talking about that evaluation of the greater good versus the private benefit, yes. What I'm thinking about when I think about the helping and assisting with kind of like I would call it like emergency or transitional funding for this, is that you run the real possibility that if we can't make sure those pods persist in our community until we figure out a plot of land to put them, we might very well lose them altogether. And in the state of a housing crisis, losing, 50 or 100 pods is a really big deal to our community and the greater good of addressing the housing crisis. So do you see where I'm going with that? I feel like you could kind of, again, maybe there's a way to word it differently or approach it differently, but it seems like there is a greater good with that that's trying to be addressed versus just trying to help a nonprofit.
And I did look at that. Because they are, eventually this is what's going to be used in the program. Now, in working with CPAD and getting information of where they stand in the process, they're far from that process. So how much money is going to be expended to store these pods, possibly an extended period of time? Again, that is, by analogy, I kind of looked at that situation similar to like one of our private partners that we have that can do a service for us, and I use like the ambulance service, and we contract for specific services, and we know that they're providing the service to us, and there's the funding. They use that funding for the purposes, the public purpose. Now, if they were having funding issues because they can't pay their rent and they can go under, is that a permissible purpose? I view that the same way with the pods. It's because they're having difficulty with rent, not necessarily providing us the service, but for their funding, internal funding issues, we're now being asked to go above and beyond for something that is an indirect expense to the provision of services that we're providing to us. That's more or less what it came down in analyzing how would I look at this in these other contexts. Yes, it may cause the ambulance service to go under, and that does happen. Ambulance services, they don't have a long lifespan. They're always continuously changing. And that's for that simple reason. They don't have enough contracts to support their operations. Does that justify the city to be funding extra for other purposes that are not directly related to the public purpose? It does. That's how I came to my opinion to get to that point that it probably wouldn't match. But again, facts are important, and based on the facts I had, that's how I came up with that conclusion.
What if, just hypothetically speaking, different scenario, so the storage of it sounds like that's the line that you're drawing, right? Because you're using the term storing them. Mm-hmm. But what if it was helping them pay down the cost that they had to purchase them? Again, these would be like to address the housing crisis. Would that be in your, again, I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this, but do you envision that being maybe a permissible alternative to helping with storage?
That may, if we're paying that down for that service, for the loan program they have, are we indirectly loaning our credit to a private enterprise? And that gets into another issue that's beyond the two-part test.
Okay, I'm just curious. Thank you.
Other questions for Attorney Leal at this point? Yeah, Commissioner Cooney.
So we just heard that we are requesting $1.5 million toward the RX Flint. Are you saying that we can't do that?
There are different ways we can get that. That would be something that we could go through, as part of our funding through FFE, because that's not tied to general funds. That's a separate private nonprofit funding source, or look for other avenues, other types of federal state funding that may be available out there. And as members of MML, we could always request that we lobby our legislature to come up with a law to help allow us that or give us that authority to fund them.
Okay. So there are ways.
There are other ways to fund it, and that's the important part, is because general funds may be restricted under the Michigan Constitution. It doesn't mean that there are other ways to get there.
Okay.
So thank you, Commissioner Cooney. So I just want to redirect this a little bit, because we're not talking about 1.5 tonight, right? This is tied to us trying to make some decisions about $190,000 right now for this year, and not for next year, and not those requests. So there'll be lots of time for those conversations, valuable conversations. I appreciate it, and a lot of nuance around that also. So I don't know if we have the capacity or prepared this evening just to think about that 190, which we had talked about, and just, we had this unfortunate situation last year where we had set aside some money, which we did not spend last year, right? And so this was this idea of like, okay, let's take last year's, and while we're deciding about last year's, let's decide this year's. Here we are already, quarter of the way through the year anyway, so we can effectively spend those dollars that are allocated for us for those decisions. So that's what I'm hoping we can just think about, is that related to that rather modest number. And maybe we don't have enough information here. Maybe we're going to wait till we got a full component of, our team up here too. But Commissioner Pradel?
I have one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
Aaron. So on the number 2 here, where it talks about the KNAC, you were talking about how it could be used for like an incubation space post capital campaign.
Yes.
But the way I interpreted number 2 was you saying basically because of historic preservation permissible uses, and because it's a registered historic site, that there could potentially be the ability to help fund it as a capital, to help fund their capital campaign. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was 2 requests for KNAC for the money to help for the renovations. It's because it's a historical building, the designated historical landmark, and 2, incubator support. So historical funding for renovations is expressly allowed by state statute, and there is a public purpose. But the incubators program, when they start that, or they're going into that, then we would be able to use general fund dollars for that.
So both are green, basically green.
Yes.
It's just the first one we talked about, the one for the incubation space dollars for the entities that are benefiting from it for economic development purposes, that would be only once the renovations have concluded. Because the thing that I wanted to make sure to clarify is like,
yes,
they're already an incubator. Like that's happening right now. It's not like it's sitting empty right now. And once it's done, then they're going to start supporting. There's like 60 some different like small businesses, mom and pop, startups that are literally in that facility right now,
right,
who are doing incubation work. So I just want to make sure to clarify that. Do we need to wait till to fund it once it's?
According to their own website, when they talked about, and there's a newspaper article, their plan is to become an incubator. Right now, they do rent space to different learning arts, dance, other businesses. They rent office space, and that's all they're doing. That serves as their little location for their business. There is not that type of incubation business support that is being done. In that, I believe it was the article that actually said, that is where we want to go, but we need to finish with the exterior renovations for the historical building first.
Gotcha.
And that's how I came to that. If something has changed and they're done, that may change they may be eligible now, but I just generated based on what they publicize on the website and a newspaper article.
I just want to make sure to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify to what Commissioner Praedel says. So, because for KNAC, Attorney Leal, because this is a historic spot, we would be able to give general funds to help with their capital campaign. And then once, say, the building is completed, then we can also go back to give funds.
Right, and they're going to have to come and demonstrate to the city that we want to, for calendar year 2025, this is the incubator support and we're looking for funding. So they should probably be starting this year to start making that pitch. And so that way that if they're, if they're starting to go in that direction, then possibly, and they're going to start in 2025, then that could allow us to get that, they'd have to show us this is the incubator program. These other 2 organizations spell out and specify exactly what they do, what services they're providing, the programs, especially the Can Do Kalamazoo.
Other questions at this point? Colleagues? All right, seeing none, thank you. So I know this is kind of a process and takes a while to work through this, and there's no huge rush. We don't have to decide this tonight, obviously. And I have to say that when I look at this list, other things have come to mind since we made this list. And so, reflect, I can sort of run those through the momentary filter of, well, what would Attorney Leal say about those things? He hasn't had a chance to evaluate them, but I'm guessing that maybe other folks up here might have another idea or 2 they've come up with since this list was created. So how do we want to go about trying to pull a list together and trying to work this down to something that seems like it makes sense with our, this commission directed money? I'm just going to throw out some ideas here. We could cite for just a couple things right now, not go through the whole list and say, are there top 3 things? Not another thing that's a little challenging is that, only a very small number of these things have dollar amounts attached to them also. So that makes it a little difficult to go through this list. So I don't know if we want to what would be the most effective way to go through this? Maybe we just want to take this information for now, and kind of think about it more and come back again if we have some new ideas, or turn those into staff before we come back again and donate some time to that. Just looking for ideas. Yeah, Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that if we all discuss this now, we have certain things that we support that we all brought forward in our earlier meeting, maybe we can move on those. It's not like we're trying to spend the entire $190,000 right now. There could be some that we may want to, again, like you said, add to the list, but then again, we're going to have Attorney Leal vet those. And again, that's going to take some process too, and we're already in April, so may not get things started until June. So I believe that maybe what we can do is kind of, yes, some of these don't have dollar amounts on them. Maybe we can talk about that for some of the ones that are in green. Maybe we can talk about the discussion of, yes, moving forward with the Shop with the Senior and the funds for the van for KDPS and the Pels, because summer is coming sooner than later, and I think that's beneficial to have that in the works now. And maybe just going maybe through a few of these, the ones that are green, seeing if we want to pick our top 5 for what we have, and just maybe kind of talk about that and maybe bring that back to the next commission, talk about our top 5 or my thoughts.
My only reservation is that Commissioner Hoffman's not here. And I mean, obviously you can't plan things perfectly, because we could say, hey, we're going to have a discussion 4 weeks from now, and then we're all planning to be here and one of us is sick, you know. So I mean, I guess it is a little risky just to say, let's postpone it because one person's not here, but it does concern me, because I know Commissioner Hoffman had ideas on there as well, and to not have an opportunity to, but I do like your idea though of like the more things that are more time sensitive, you know, like Parks and Rec needing the vehicle potentially for summer programming. That would make sense if we're going to do that. That one might be more time sensitive to do something about.
Other thoughts on process?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
Vice
agree with
Mayor.
that, Commissioner Prudel and Commissioner Decker, absolutely. I think it is time sensitive with the Shop with the Senior. The planning should begin now for that event in December. So with that, but then I see that we've been given information about Commissioner Hoffman's things here, just for our personal information, that we have information about what she's put out to us. But absolutely, I think we should probably get some dollar amounts next to the greens before we move forward.
That's definitely helpful, Commissioner Decker, yes?
Thank you, Mayor. Vice Mayor Hess, I will say that I printed off some of the stuff. Unfortunately, I brought the information for Cradle, and Commissioner Hoffman's request was for the Health Reproductive Fund. So we can work with them to have them get us some more of that information. But you do have a pamphlet that talks about one of the other requests, which is the Human Trafficking Division within the YWCA. And I also did want to say, too, that for number 17 that Commissioner Cooney brought up regarding the increase in water weights, it looks like that's something that we can use our general funds to fund. And I know I have Director Baker working on getting some numbers and things like that for that. So I think maybe we can definitely hold off on that one for thinking until we get some more numbers from Community Action.
Attorney Leal.
Number 17, I didn't say this, but that authorization for giving gifts and contributions, that's in the authority for utilities. So we're using the fund out of the utility fund, the water fund, not general funds.
So in essence, that would not be on this list?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson?
Yeah, I agree. If there are any time-sensitive ones that we are, all in agreement with, we can go ahead and address those. I believe it would be nice to have rough order of magnitudes, next to these ideas, so we can have a sense of what we have to work with based off of which initiatives we go with. And I also think it would be helpful now that we do have this understanding of what's allowed and what isn't, to have the opportunity to restructure our ideas or provide a couple more, to Attorney Leal and get those on the plate for next time as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Thank
Commissioner
you,
Decker.
Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. I just want to say I like this process of us bringing ideas forward and then within the general funds and having our attorney kind of look over those. That way there's no questions. If we want to put some dollar amounts next to stuff, I believe the drinking fountains cost about $60,000. one, but I'm pretty sure Director Baker can get us a closer number on that. That's just what I hear. So I think maybe putting a 60K next to that would be one.
All right, well, great. Well, I think, so I'm understanding, it seems like everyone's pretty comfortable with this, is that for a variety of reasons, wait for full component of folks here, one thing. Another thing, get some more specific dollars associated with these items, an opportunity to add some more ideas and have our Attorney Leal carefully go through those. Thank you, sir, for being available for that. And then trying to schedule that relatively quickly. I don't know what our cow agenda looks like going forward here, but maybe if we've already thought about it and come forward, it wouldn't take us too awfully long to roll through that. That said, related to the idea is that there's something that's, I mean, I don't know what our procurement process looks like. We're on the verge of starting our sports activities for summer. It seems like if nothing else, authorizing the van, which I presume will be using my deal to acquire that van, which is, helps with our procurement process a little bit because we don't have to bid all that out. It's already, that part is taken care of. At least that. I mean, I know shop the senior planning, but it is not till December. I mean, are we comfortable with just authorizing an additional amount for the van, if nothing else tonight, and then moving ahead with the rest of it? Would that work for folks? Yeah, so just kind of an acclamation on that. What would that look like, COO Lamb, for getting that on the agenda? And
yes, I do believe we could certainly work to get that on the next business agenda. As part of the policy for this funding, the recommendation is that you make a request so that it can be on the next formal agenda. And so what we could do, obviously work with our team, but I think we've got direction on the van, shop with the senior is an item that we've done before. That's fairly straightforward. I think what we can look for the van is to see what we can bring forward in relative short order so we can get moving on the vans.
Is that okay for everybody? Yep. Okay. Great. Thanks for everybody's work on this. Thanks for bringing it back, CO Lamb.
Quick clarification question. I think as far as time frame, certainly there's time for you all to get information to us, and then there's time for staff, and particularly Attorney Leal, to work through the analysis. So I think we can leave it open-ended, but know that there's going to be at some point where we will need to kind of call the ideation phase and need to go into the evaluation phase. The other piece I would add, as far as the dollar amount, many of these could be potentially big ticket items, and I almost think that the prioritization is going to help you with the budget. Many of these are programs that any amount of funding could be a support, so it would be difficult to have a scale to assign it to. So I think potentially if you all suggested the ideas and you have a suggestion for scale that would help us with budget, as I look through this, I don't see a lot of areas where staff could really add in any additional information. So,
Mr. Mayor, I really like your idea, Commissioner Wilson, about like if each of us could just even like rank order them, to kind of help guide things forward. I mean, I could just envision when push comes to shove with what would be like $160,000 left at that point, and $25,000 a pop for things. That's not going to last long with all these ideas. So, I mean, I don't know if there would be an appetite for that to kind of help, I guess, narrow things down a little bit.
So can do folks feel comfortable? I want to do this. We got the vetting process. We have a ranking process. Do we want to individually get a ranked set of ideas to administration by, maybe our next commission meeting in time for that?
Yeah, if you could do it in advance, then we could actually report out the results of the ranking at the next meeting. If you want to make the next meeting the deadline, then we would be reporting out at the following meeting. So certainly it's up to you in terms of how much time you think you need.
Could you send out like an email type or somebody with some sort of a ranking instruction?
And just a reminder, those will be individual responses, so we're not going to be all sharing our ranking in some sort of offline meeting. Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, so we're going to be ranking what is on this list or what is new that we also want to do?
I think all in.
So does that mean that things will be brought back to us for the Attorney Leal to go over? That's my question.
I guess maybe we'll see. I'm just thinking, we're all kind of doing this right from, in the moment, but maybe part of that process is once we get those, then Attorney Leal is going to have to do a screening on it for how many new ideas might be appearing on that list.
The most difficult part of the process in going through these is finding information about the program and searching statutes. Michigan compiled laws, there's a lot of laws, and to go through to find something that may apply. And so that's what took the longest in this exercise, is to look for the statutes.
So I would suggest, relative to this conversation, keep that in mind with any new ideas. That would be helpful,
Hi, Mayor.
as much as possible.
Sorry, one more thing. I think what would also be very helpful is maybe over the last, maybe 2 years, if finance could pull what we have supported in the past, then that way it's a no-brainer if someone wants to bring something forward, especially for the attorney. Do you think?
I do. I certainly, for as far as this conversation this evening, can provide you some of that background. So in 2020, the whole portion of funds was used to support gun violence interventions. We had 4 different programs. The funds have also been used to be able to support DEI training, to be able to look at the Shop with the Senior program. We did there was a year during COVID where the funds were not spent, but over the last 3 years, those are the types of things that the funds have gone towards.
Clear enough? All right, well, appreciate everyone's participation in that. Now is the opportunity on our agenda for commissioner comments. Are there any comments for the committee of the whole meeting? All right, seeing none, just a reminder for anyone who's watching that there will be an opportunity for commissioner comments this evening at the end of our business meeting as well, which we are unfortunately going to be missing Iowa State and Louisiana with the famous Caitlin Clark, starting at 7:15 this evening. Oh, you're going to be streaming it here on the dais. Okay. All right. Well, thanks. I'll see everybody in a little bit. We are adjourned. Yeah.